So in case I haven't mentioned it before, among other things, I'm a writer. One of the things I've learned about good writing, and I'm not claiming to be a good writer, but I do try to learn from it when I find it, is that the more specific the story, the more grounded it is in a very specific time and place, the more it can connect with universal truths. You may ask, what do you mean by that? When I was in grade school, one of the most popular musicals in the United States was a production called Fiddler on the Roof. If you've never listened to the soundtrack or seen the movie or a stage production of it, I highly recommend it. It takes place in the small Jewish village of Tevya in Tsarist Russia during the early 1900s, and revolution was in the air. Now, it certainly had catchy tunes and fun dance numbers, but that's not the primary reason it was popular. And it certainly wasn't because a majority of Americans in the 1970s thought of themselves as poor Russian Jewish milkmen who had 5 daughters, or as one of his colorful neighbors like the matchmaker or the village tailor. No, by grounding the audience in this very specific time, in this very specific place, with these very specific characters, the musical was able to explore the universal themes of trying to make sense of our world and how we provide the best future we can for our children, even as the traditions and the rules that we have been raised to live by seem to be failing us. You may ask, how do we make sense of our world and provide the best future we can for our children? That I can tell you in one word, and it isn't tradition. Welcome to the INRIS Files, presenting thoughts on culture, history, and the human condition from a very specific Generation X point of view. When my father was old enough, he dropped out of high school and joined the Air Force. Now, having known him for all of my life so far, I can vouch that he's a very intelligent guy, but school didn't agree with him. The Vietnam War was a thing, and he knew that if he didn't volunteer, he would likely be drafted. And he knew that he wanted to be a pilot. So he signed up for the Air Force, and given his intellectual aptitude and his perfect eyesight and his desire to become a pilot, they, of course, assigned him to completely different duties that had nothing to do with flying. The Air Force sent him all over the world, and while he was in the vicinity of the India-Pakistan border, he met a girl who was going to a boarding school there. Sometime later, when he mustered out of the service, and she was attending a college in the United States, they reconnected, and she dropped out of university with what was sometimes referred to in those days as her MRS degree, which is to say they got married. And a couple of years after that, they started having kids. He worked a trade, but he chafed at working for the man just as much as he had chafed at serving in the military, so he would occasionally strike out on his own to start a new business venture. I'm summarizing here, unfairly so, but the business would fail for one reason or another, so he'd go back to working his trade for a few years until inevitably he would strike out again to try a new business venture. Eventually, my mother would find a job to get her out of the house and help improve their finances, and this eventually led her to working up the ladder at a local bank, and from there she went on to become an accountant. She never did complete her college degree. She never wanted to go back to school, and this imposed limits on how high up she could move, even though she was the best accountant at the firm where she ultimately worked. As for me, I did okay in school, but every once in a while, my tendency to be bored in school and to procrastinate severely on my homework would cause my grades to suffer. My mom would sit down with me to make sure I did my homework, and that would help for a little while, but by the time I was in 6th grade, I was failing math hard. Unbeknownst to any of us at the time, however, I had aced the standardized tests that they give 6th graders, and I was identified by a program at the local university for what they called a gifted math program. They said that it wasn't unusual for kids who were gifted to fail at math or other subjects because they were just so bored with it all. In order to succeed, these kids needed to be challenged. I'd like to pause here for a second to point out that the thought has crossed my mind more than once that if my father had been similarly identified when he was in school, I wonder if his educational and career paths might not have taken a completely different direction. And same for my mother, frankly, who had some math chops of her own. Anyway, Now I was being told I was gifted instead of lazy, and whoo boy, did that change my relationship with education and my relationship with myself. So I took advanced math at the university and honors classes and all my other subjects at the public schools. I went on to a good college because that's just what you do. It was the default path. My younger sister, in the meantime, struggled a bit more in school than I did. She was not rescued by a gifted program the way I was, and she went on to a local college and dropped out after a year and a half, and then took a job as an administrative assistant at some local company while she lived at home and dated the guitar player from a band she liked. You may ask, how did that work out for us? A high school dropout married to a college dropout, and two of their children, an Ivy Leaguer and another college dropout. My father spent many years working a trade and starting up a business which would eventually fail, eventually getting his GED and earning a 2-year associate's degree and finding steady work as a plant manager until the man used him up and discarded him, and then after a very long stretch of unemployment, even though he had vowed to never again pursue another business venture, he once more pursued a business venture, but this time he was able to make it into a success. My mother, who never did go back to college, supported the two of them during his long stretch of unemployment. She helped run that business venture with my father, and eventually she left her steady job, where they refused to promote her because of her lack of a degree, and they had to hire 3 people to take her place. The business paid off their house and their vehicles and provided a nest egg that allowed them to retire in their mid-60s while still in decent health. Oh, and by the way, my father did eventually become a pilot. In fact, he used his benefits from the GI Bill to pay for his flight school, so in an interesting turn of fate, the Air Force actually did end up training him to become a pilot, just not the way he had originally hoped. Me, I graduated with a dual degree from one Ivy, picked up a master's degree from another Ivy, and my career wandered all over the place for years. I, too, tried many business ventures, some of which succeeded, but where I had business partners who didn't want the same things out of the company that I did, so I left. Other business ventures of mine simply failed. And I'm currently working for the man as a software designer while I figure out what I'm going to do when I grow up. But I'm paying the bills for the time being and have been the sole provider for myself and the kids for quite some time now. Whether I'll be able to retire in my mid-60s is not a sure bet at this point. As for my sister, she moved up the ranks at her company and then on to other companies and has advanced her career to the point where she is now a vice president at a multinational high-tech firm where her colleagues each seem to have multiple PhDs in highly technical fields. She's married to a fellow with a PhD in materials science, and they are raising their kids in an upper-middle-class neighborhood just outside a city known for its economic opportunities. And like our mother, my sister has never completed her college degree. So now her children, like my children, are at that age where it's time to consider starting college or not. You may ask, so how does this help us with making sense of our world and providing the best future we can for our children, even as the traditions and the rules that we have been raised to live by seem to be failing us? I'll tell you, it's complicated. My kids look at me and their mother, and because we went to college, yeah, they'll probably go to college too, because that's what you do. It's the default path. And my younger sister's kids are saying, but Mom, you didn't go to college, and you did okay. And on the one hand, yes, she did okay. But on the other hand, she'll also note that not having a degree made it much harder for her to get where she is. Not having that degree may have tacked on years to the career path that finally led to the success she enjoys now. But on the other hand, none of us can say with certainty that the default path of getting good grades and going to college will guarantee a stable career or a happy life or a faster track to success. But on the other hand, nothing in life is certain, but we can improve the odds. And for many people, the process of earning that college degree can help build a solid foundation for learning new skills and adapting to change over time. It can help one to find one's tribe and build a community of support from there. But on the other hand, college has become exceedingly expensive, and graduating with all that debt can shackle you to a life of working for the man that might otherwise be avoided. But on the other hand, no, there is no other hand. My oldest is currently struggling with college. He has always struggled with online learning, even though he has otherwise always excelled at school. And because of the COVID-19 pandemic striking when it did, and because he went to a college that he didn't get to visit before he chose to go there, my son, the extrovert, went away to a college where they told him to go to his room alone and attend class online. He's in his second year now, and although those conditions have been lifted, it may be too late. He's not finding his tribe. College isn't agreeing with him. As the traditions and the rules that we have been raised to live by seem to be failing us, how can that fiddler on the roof keep his balance? That I can tell you in one word: adjust. There is no one true path. There is value to the traditions and rules that we have been raised to live by. There is value to the default path. But if they aren't working, take another path. Adjust. The trick, of course, is figuring out what to adjust and how. What are your thoughts on the one true path? Please share your stories in the comments section below, and please be kind when you engage in the conversation. Be sure to click like if you want to see more videos like this, and subscribe if you'd like to be alerted about them when I post. Thank you for checking out the INRIS Files, and we'll see you again next time.